Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Mark from the States. How we doing today? I am doing fantastic. I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for coming. Today, we're going to do a video from our good friend, History Chap, Chris Green. Please, the link to this video and his channel, if you aren't already a member, a subscriber of his, is right below. So just scroll down. I'll have the links to the video and to his channel. Today we're going to watch the video of the sad and proud story behind Britain's tomb of the unknown warrior. I've made this clear that this is one of the first places that I want to come visit when I get to come over. Pay my respects here. I've watched a couple videos over the years about this, so I am familiar with it, of course, but every little video I like to watch because it adds just another layer to the whole story, and it's such an amazing story. I invite you to come sit with me. This is going to be special, so please get over there. If you have a like and a subscribe today, please give it to Chris and History Chap channel. He's amazing. I belong to his newsletter, so I get an email every week laying out what's going on, and I encourage you to sign up for that if you don't as well. He's just awesome. He's just an awesome dude, man. So please over there, sign up, subscribe if you haven't already. Get lost on his channel. He's got so many videos. I would have done this earlier, last week or something, but I wanted to allow this video to have some time on the channel before I start watching it and let it earn its course there. So we are now dipping back into it. Just to update, we will have the walk past, the march past video that's coming up. I think I'm just about ready and finished with that. And yeah, hope everything is going well for all of you. It's been a crazy couple weeks. Channel note update. In December, we, meaning me and my family, will be having my mother-in-law come stay with us. She arrives on the 3rd. My oldest son is going to stay with us pretty much the whole month, which is exciting. So when that happens, I won't be doing really any videos here at the house. Where I do, as a lot of you already know, where I do the videos, it's pretty much just in the living room area. When my mother-in-law comes, she stays in the office, which is my oldest son's old room where he used to sleep. And so she takes that office, and when he comes, he's pretty much out here in the living room on the couch. So, as you know, I do these videos early in the morning. So if he's out here sleeping, I probably won't be doing any videos, at least here in this chair. Maybe I'll figure something out to where I can be outside doing videos somehow, some way. I know it can be done. I just got to learn how to do it. But I may also pre-record some videos that I can play during the month of December. But the month of December will be very limited on content, except for the moments that I have to record, which there probably will be. There'll be some times that they're all gone, and I'll be able to sit and learn on some videos. So I'm not saying there won't be any, but it's not going to be as many. So just kind of a heads up there. Hope you're all doing well. come sit with me. Let's get into the sad and proud story behind Britain's tomb of the unknown warrior. Let's go.
In Westminster Abbey, London, lies the tomb of Britain's unknown warrior. But how was he chosen from all the thousands who died in the First World War? And why did he end up in this ancient place of worship? And why is it called the tomb of the unknown warrior and not the unknown soldier? So as we near Remembrance Sunday, I thought it was time to explore this sad and also proud story of Britain's tomb of the unknown warrior. Numerically, the First World War was the costliest war Britain has ever fought. According to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, 888,000 men from the British Isles died in the conflict. A whole swathe of Britain's men were lost. In fact, in the 1921 census, for every 109 women, there were just 100 men. It's estimated that 3 million people in Britain lost a close relative, and many more lost their friends.
That fact alone is just mind-boggling. And I hear it from all of you, and it's just heartbreaking. Each and every one of you has a family member that has been affected by the First World War. It's just incredible to hear the sheer numbers. It's just you rarely, and I'm not, it's far and few here for me, just considering the amount of people there are here in the U.S. But and here's the thing: I am so blessed and grateful that so many of you share stories of your family members. It's heartwarming, and I'm honored to be able to be a part of hearing those stories. It's just really special. So I want to say thank you to all of you for including me in learning about your family as well.
No wonder at the time it was called the Great War. The huge emotional and physical losses are remembered to this day, not least at the annual Remembrance Sunday services and the tradition of wearing poppies. But also, according to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, only half of those British dead were formally identified. The rest lie under gravestones marked with the words, "A soldier of the Great War, known unto God." Meanwhile, many others have never even been found to receive such a headstone. Even today, local farmers and archaeologists continue to come across skeletons of dead British soldiers. Every year, thousands of people travel to the British and Commonwealth First World War cemeteries in France and Belgium to visit the graves of family members. Maybe you have. But what about the relatives of the 400,000 men whose bodies have never been identified?
Wow.
How can they mourn, pay their respects, or simply have a physical link to the past? It so happened that this sense of loss and void had occurred to an army chaplain during the war on the Western Front. Reverend David Railton had been awarded the Military Cross for rescuing 3 men whilst under fire. In 1916, he was just outside Armentières when he saw a simple grave in a back garden. On a rough wooden cross were written the words, "An unknown British soldier of the Black Watch." As he looked at that simple cross and those simple words, thoughts tumbled through his head. He wrote in his diary, who was he? From which of the lonely mystic glens of Old Scotia did he come from? Was he a citizen of Old Reekie? Was he one of the grand old contemptibles? Was he just a laddie, newly joined, aged 18, the only son of a shepherd from the faraway Highlands? He continued, "There was no answer to those questions, nor has there ever been yet. So I thought and wrestled in thought. What can I do to ease the pain of that father, mother, brother, sister, sweetheart, wife or friend?" Quietly and gradually there came from the mist of thought this answer, clear and strong. Let this body, this symbol of him, be carried reverently over the sea to his native land. After the war, he took his idea of a symbolic grave representing all the Britons who fell but were never identified to the Dean of Westminster Abbey, Herbert Ryle. The 64-year-old Ryle had previously been Bishop of Exeter and then Winchester before becoming Dean of what some people called the British Empire's Parish Church in 1910. Presented with Railton's idea in August 1920, the Dean went on a lobbying offensive with the military, the government, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and even the King. Chief of the Imperial General Staff, Field Marshal Sir Henry Wilson, swiftly came on board. So too did Prime Minister David Lloyd George. In fact, the only opposition was initially from the King, George V, who wondered if those who'd lost a relative might feel that it was all a bit too insensitive and almost like a PR stunt. However, finally in October 1920, Ryle was given the go-ahead.
Yeah, I could see the hesitation. Sometimes good intentions have different results than we intend, obviously. So I can see why the king would be hesitant about going along with that. I mean, we're all glad he did, and with Spurns, of course, you know, over here on my side with the unknown soldier tomb. So I'm grateful that he chose to go for it.
A memorial service committee was established with the task of bringing an unknown warrior home before the very first armistice service on the 11th of November. Whilst both France and the USA have tombs of the unknown soldier, that in Westminster Abbey is to the unknown warrior. Initially, Railton had argued for the phrase unknown comrade, but he was overruled by the Dean of Westminster Abbey, and so the unknown warrior is its title to this day. Just before midnight on the 8th of November 1920, the officer commanding and so phrase unknown warrior. Initially, Railton had argued for the phrase unknown comrade, but he was overruled by the Dean of Westminster Abbey, and so the unknown warrior is its title to this day. Just before midnight on the 8th of November 1920, the officer commanding British forces in France and Belgium, or at least those that remained 2 years after the war had concluded, Brigadier General Louis John Wyatt, entered the military chapel at Saint-Paul, near Arras. He was accompanied by just one other officer, Colonel Gell. Inside the chapel lay 4 bodies inside individual coffins, each wrapped in a Union flag. The 4 had been brought from particularly bloody battlefields where the British had fought on the Western Front: the Somme, Ypres, Arras, and the Arno. Gell's responsibility was to make sure that the general didn't try to identify any of the bodies. With the colonel in attendance, Wyatt closed his eyes and picked one body at random. Then the 2 men sealed the coffin. So, who was the unknown warrior? Well, we really don't know. And despite the Times claiming the body was from the battlefield at Ypres, an officer at Saint-Paul, Colonel Bradstock, wrote a letter to a colleague in the War Office refuting that, stating, "Nobody, not even the general, knows from where he came. We took enormous trouble to make certain of this. You can say with absolute certainty that no one in this world knows where he came from." To this day, no one knows which battlefield the unknown warrior was from. And part of the reason that the word warrior, not soldier, is apt is because we don't really know if he was a soldier. I mean, he might have been from the Royal Air Force or its predecessors, or he might have been from the Royal Navy, seeing as the Naval Brigade did fight on the Western Front, and some sailors transferred to the army to actually see more action.
See, and in the previous videos, they may have mentioned that, but I don't remember. Okay, well, that explains that.
Although the law of averages would suggest that he probably was a soldier.
Sure.
We don't know his rank, his social status, or profession. Maybe they were from the aristocracy, like Downton Abbey, Or maybe they were a servant from downstairs. He may have been a university scholar, a miner, or a gypsy. We don't know if he was Methodist, Roman Catholic, or Church of England. For all we know, he might be Jewish. We don't know whether he was from England, Wales, Scotland, or Ireland. The unknown warrior is a symbol for everyone who lost someone dear to them, especially those who have no grave to visit. And without wishing to set any hairs running, he might have been from the wider empire, as soldiers from Canada, Newfoundland, India, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa all served and died on the Western Front. Although again, the law of averages, rather like being a soldier, also would make it more likely that he did come from the British Isles. But where from in the British Isles? We don't know. He can be anything and everything. A symbol of loss for the entire nation, and indeed beyond. And before we go on, you might be wondering what happened to those other bodies. Well, there are conflicting stories. Wyatt himself claimed that they were buried at the cemetery at St. Paul, although records indicate that the last burials there had occurred back in July. Another officer at St. Paul, although obviously not in the chapel, was Cecil Smith, who later rose to the rank of Major General. Smith claimed that they were not buried at the cemetery because 3 late additions would easily be identified as the bodies that hadn't been picked. Consequently, he said he was ordered to bury the bodies about 50 miles away, deliberately in an area where British grave parties were excavating bodies. The 3 bodies, according to Smith, were found as intended and reinterred. And whilst the warrior's identity is...
No way. I mean, brilliant. I mean, because I hadn't thought of that. You could easily find out just based on how the most recent burials, so wow. I don't remember that part of the story either.
Is shrouded in mystery along with those other bodies. There's also some mystery about the date upon which he was actually selected. General Wyatt initially recorded it as the 7th of November, but it's well documented that the following morning the warrior began his journey back to England, and after just 1 day's travel was definitely resting in Boulogne. The National Army Museum in London believe that Wyatt got his dates muddled up, so I'm going to go with their selection date of the 8th of November. So, the following morning, that is the 9th of November, following a short service held by army chaplains representing the Church of England, the Roman Catholics, and the non-denominational churches, the coffin was moved to the Channel port of Boulogne, 90 miles away. There it was placed inside a second coffin, made from an oak tree felled at Hampton Court Palace. And inside was placed a 16th century warrior's sword, personally chosen by King George V from the Royal Collection at the Tower of London. The coffin of the unknown warrior was now draped in a flag that Railton had used as a makeshift altar cloth while serving on the Western Front. That Union flag, known as the Padres flag, now hangs in Westminster Abbey. That night, a detachment of French soldiers kept vigil over the warrior in the ancient citadel of the town. The next morning, escorted by a whole division of French soldiers and 1,000 local schoolchildren, the coffin was borne on a gun carriage through the streets of the ancient town. Vast crowds gathered in silence as church bells throughout Boulogne tolled. As it reached the port, the escort were met by the Supreme Allied Commander, Marshal Foch, and the King's representative, Lieutenant General Sir George Macdonell, who saluted the unknown warrior. Gently the coffin was borne aboard the destroyer HMS Verdun for the short journey across the English Channel to finally come home. The Verdun had been specifically chosen as a nod to the French, whose bloodiest battle of the war had been fought at Verdun. And that battle has another role in this story, so stay tuned. The destroyer slowly moved out of the port, where it was joined by an escort of 6 more Royal Navy warships. As the convoy arrived off Dover, the guns of Dover Castle fired a 19-gun Field Marshal's salute. Greeted by a band playing Land of Hope and Glory, the coffin now made its way in a procession headed by the mayor through the town towards the railway station. And there it was placed on a special train to London's Victoria Station. The coffin was placed in a luggage van that had previously been used to transport the body of nurse Edith Cavell following her execution by the Germans. Arriving in London, the coffin stayed aboard the train overnight. There's a plaque at Victoria Station which marks this moment in history. On the 11th of November 1920, 2 years exactly from when the First World War ended, the body of the unknown soldier was borne on a gun carriage pulled by 6 black horses of the Royal Horse Artillery. As the cortege made their way through London towards Whitehall, with the 3rd Battalion Coldstream Guards in support, another Field Marshal salute was fired in nearby Hyde Park. Finally, it arrived at London's other memorial to those who had fallen for their country, the Cenotaph. The story of the Cenotaph is fascinating and poignant in its own right. Now, whilst we remember the 11th of November 1918 as the end of the First World War, that date actually marks an armistice. The war only officially ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in June the following year. Now, to mark the official end of the war, both France and Great Britain, as victorious allies, decided to celebrate with a victory parade in their respective capitals 3 weeks later. And as part of their parade, the French decided to march past a monument to their dead. British Prime Minister David Lloyd George liked that idea and instructed architect Sir Edward Lytton's to design something similar for the London parade. Working as fast as he could, Lytton produced a design within a week. With just 12 days to turn it around, even a temporary memorial from wood, plaster and canvas was pushing it, but he did manage it. Sited at Whitehall, it became, without any intention, the focal point of the parade as far as the public were concerned. Afterwards, hundreds of thousands of people flocked to it, walking past with heads bowed and placing wreaths at its base. Plans to remove the temporary structure kept having to be pushed back as the crowds continued to flock to pay their respects to the fallen. Finally, by July 1920, Lytton's Cenotaph was starting to take a battering from the elements. But
We'll go back a little bit, but I'm looking at this photo and I start getting drawn into the photo and I stop listening, which is a problem that I have that my wife is so kind to always point out. But I'm looking at all the American flags here and soldiers marching past. You have down here, you have the dignitaries who they probably salute to at some point. Up here, another regiment or so. Just look how packed the sides are. This is before guardrails, but look how crowded it is. It is so awesome to see, and I wish. I don't know when this photo was taken. Just assuming it's 1920. For my own personal and selfish reasons, I wish there still was an American regiment that would go by, or at least a few would go by and pay respects, and I get why they don't, but I just find this very interesting. Anyway, back to Chris.
By July 1920, Lytton's Cenotaph was starting to take a battering from the elements. But so great was public support that the government now decided that a permanent memorial was needed. Once more the task fell to Sir Edward Lytton's, whose new memorial was built from slightly more permanent Portland stone. It's the one that remains there to this day. As Big Ben chimed 11 a.m, the time of the armistice, on the 11th of November 1920, with the gun carriage bearing the unknown warrior alongside, King George unveiled the new cenotaph. There then followed a 2-minute silence before the last post was sounded.
Looks like there's snow on the ground. Can you imagine that they removed it? That it was just temporary? That'd be, it'd be so hard to realize. Of course, if they'd removed it, it'd be forgotten in history probably. But I'm so glad they decided. I'm so glad for the British people at the time to demand, essentially to keep it. And this is also one of those things I want to see when I come visit.
Every year since that date, the monarch attends the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph along with other dignitaries and places a wreath at the base. But at that very first service, that wreath laying didn't happen. Instead, the king placed his wreath, comprising of red roses and bay leaves, on the hearse of the unknown warrior. Nice touch, you might think, but you might also be wondering why his wreath didn't contain red poppies. Well, the poppy only became the accepted symbol of remembrance the following year during the first ever poppy appeal. The king and the rest of the royal family, accompanied by senior military commanders, politicians and other dignitaries, now walked behind the gun carriage as it made its way down Whitehall to Westminster Abbey. Reverend David Railton's dream was about to come true.
Wow.
Arriving at the north door, the coffin was carried into the ancient abbey. The pallbearers for Britain's unknown warrior consisted of Britain's most senior military commanders. Representing the Royal Navy were Admirals of the Fleet Sir Hedworth Mew and Sir Henry Jackson, along with Admiral Sir David Beatty and Admiral Sir Charles Madden. From the army were Field Marshals Haig, French, Sir Henry Wilson and Lord Methuen. Also representing the army were General Lord Horne and General Sir Julian Byng, who would later serve as Governor-General of Canada. The final pallbearers were Royal Marine General Albert Farragut-Liff and representing the newly established Royal Air Force, Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Trenchard. By the way, Trenchard would himself be buried in the Abbey when he died in 1956. Shouldering the coffin, they entered Westminster Abbey through the north door. As the unknown warrior entered the holy building, he passed through a guard of honour consisting of nearly 100 holders of the Victoria Cross, commanded by 31-year-old New Zealander Bernard Freyberg VC. Amongst them was even a Victoria Cross recipient from the Battle of Rorke's Drift way back in 1879. Also present was Britain's most decorated common soldier in the First World War, William Coltman, who was awarded 2 Distinguished Combat Medals and 2 military medals to go alongside his VC. And I've told his story in a previous episode, and I'll post a link at the end. Having passed through that guard of honour, the coffin was carried to the west end of the nave, whilst the choir sang the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd." The coffin of the unknown warrior was then lowered into a grave, specially dug in the floor of the nave. King George V now stepped forward and threw in a handful of soil brought from the Western Front. A short service was conducted for the select congregation of just 1,000 people. There, alongside royalty and generals and politicians, were 100 women in black. All of them had lost either a husband and also a son, their only son, or sadly, all their sons. Despite the hurried nature of the preparations for this service, over 15,000 grieving mothers and wives had applied for tickets. 7,500 of them were in that only son and all their sons dead category. The service concluded with the Lord's Prayer and the choir singing "Abide with Me," followed by the congregation joining in with "God of Our Fathers," and was brought to a close by the sounding of the Reveille. On the same day, the coffin of the French unknown soldier arrived at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, where it would be interred in the January. It too had been chosen from 8 bodies from various battlefields, brought to the citadel at Verdun, site of France's bloodiest battle in the war. I said Verdun would get another mention, didn't I? There, a second-class soldier, Augustine, chose one at random by placing a bouquet on the coffin. Despite King George's initial reservation as to how the concept of the unknown warrior would be received, it struck a chord with the British public. During the following week, over 1.25 million people filed past the grave in Westminster Abbey. A week after the service, the grave was filled with 100 bags of soil brought from the battlefields where the British Imperial forces had fought on the Western Front. A temporary plaque was placed on top, which read, "British warrior, who fell in the Great War 1914-1918 for king and country. Greater love hath no man than this." In October 1921, the commander of the US forces on the Western Front, General John Pershing, presented the unknown warrior with the US Medal of Honor on behalf of the American people. The medal is now actually displayed in a case on the pillar to the left of the tomb as you look into the Abbey.
I did not know this. Or again, I had heard about it and I'd forgotten about it. That's always a possibility these days. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Also nearby is the ship's bell from HMS Verdun, which had carried the body across the sea from France.
More to see.
The gesture from the USA was reciprocated by King George, and the Victoria Cross was presented to the US unknown soldier when he was buried at Arlington National Cemetery on the 11th of November 1921. On that same day, 11th of November 1921, which incidentally was the first poppy appeal, a black marble slab from Belgium was placed on top of the tomb of the unknown warrior in Westminster Abbey. On it is an inscription composed by the Dean of the Abbey, Herbert Ryle. Beneath this stone rests the body of a British warrior, unknown by name or rank, brought from France to lie among the most illustrious of the land, and buried here on Armistice Day, 11th of November 1920, in the presence of His Majesty King George V, his Ministers of State, the chiefs of his forces, and a vast concourse of the nation. Thus are commemorated the many multitudes who, during the Great War of 1914-1918, gave the most that man can give, life itself, for God, for king and country, for loved ones, home and empire, for the sacred cause of justice and freedom of the world. They buried him among the kings, because he had done good towards God and towards his house. A little less than 18 months later, during her marriage to the Duke of York, later King George VI in Westminster Abbey, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, whose older brother had been killed at the Battle of Lewes, spontaneously placed her wedding bouquet on the tomb. It's a tradition that every royal bride has followed since.
Oh, wow.
Just 2 years after that wedding, the Dean of Westminster Abbey, Herbert Ryle, died in 1925. Reverend David Railton stayed in the priesthood, serving parishes in Kent, Yorkshire, Surrey and Liverpool, before retiring to the Scottish Highlands in 1945. He died after falling from a train which was still moving at the station in Fort William in 1955.
Wow.
He was 70 years old. He's
Yikes.
pretty much forgotten now, but his idea and his legacy, born in that garden on the Western Front in 1916, live on. Westminster Abbey contains the graves of 16 monarchs of England, starting with Edward the Confessor and including Henry V and Elizabeth I. There are also the graves of David Livingstone, Sir Isaac Newton, William Wilberforce, Geoffrey Chaucer, Charles Dickens and Rudyard Kipling. And there are also the graves of political giants too, including William Gladstone, Pitt the Younger and Lord Palmerston. But without a doubt, the most moving and arguably the most worthy of all of those lying at rest in the ancient abbey is the unknown warrior. Whoever he was, wherever he came from, he is, as David Lloyd George said, a token of our mourning as individuals, for a generation lost, and for all those who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. Unknown, but not forgotten.
So good. Great job, Chris. So yeah, go check out William Coltman video. Just go over to Chris's channel and find that video. We've, I believe, done that video. So if you want to watch it on our channel, you can too. But I encourage you to go over to History Chap. Watch the videos over there. Like I said, if you've got a subscription or a like or whatever, give it to History Chap today instead of our channel. We are so appreciative and so grateful that they allow us to learn from his work. So I did learn a couple more things, or at least it reaffirmed it. I'm pretty sure there's a few things I didn't remember or I didn't know, which is awesome. The bouquet, just the most recent of the things I learned, the bouquet of every bride, queen, that laid on there. Just the Medal of Honor from Pershing. I thought that was cool. Of course, King George reciprocating that the following year on our Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The fact that they call it warrior because they didn't was even a soldier, which, of course. Gosh, great video. Great video. And that's why I always watch videos about the same topic, because you'll learn little things here and there, or just things that I've forgotten, and it reinforces. That's what I appreciate. So thank you. This, of course, was requested, which is always nice, because especially requests of channels that we have permission to watch from. I hope everybody is happy, healthy, and safe. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. There'll be a video, I don't know about tomorrow, but Saturday for sure. And I hope everybody has a great, great day. And we'll talk soon. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark. And he's from